Hi, and welcome to The Rookie and the Pro. I'm the rookie,
And I'm the pro.
and I honestly have no idea like anything about like football players. And obviously, we're starting a fantasy football league. And so and this is obviously my first time doing anything fantasy football. So
Mhm.
I need you to tell me I really go through all the players, the top players, and really kind of give me the rundown on everything with the fantasy football players because I know literally nothing.
Well,
um,
absolutely. I mean, it's important to know like who you're going to be playing, right? Like you don't want to just
mhm.
have a bunch of nobodies if you want to be competitive. So, let's
And
start
also
with
have some,
one.
yeah,
Do you know who Patrick Mahomes is?
yes.
Okay.
I am a fan of the Kansas City Chiefs, so I at least know that one, and also
Okay.
Travis Kelsey. I know that
Can
name too.
can you
That's
can you tell me what position he plays though?
Travis Kelsey. No,
Yeah. Okay.
Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback,
Okay. I mean,
but
that's very
no.
identifiable and everything, so that's a good
Wait,
place to start.
is is Travis Kelsey isn't the kicker, is he?
No.
No.
No, no, no. You think Taylor
Okay,
Swift
yeah.
would be caught with a kicker? I mean, come on.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, do you know who
Yeah.
Harrison Butker is?
No.
That's your kicker. So, he's made headlines in recent days with Taylor Swift and stuff. But I digress.
Alrighty.
So, you want to know more about some players and everything. I'm sure other people would be interesting in learning about top players. And even if you know some of these players and everything, it might be kind of surprising how certain players ranked out over the last 4 years. So, what I did is I decided to compile my handy dandy little spreadsheet here, and I just put everybody ranked based on how they finished last year. Okay. And
Mhm.
then I gave you those rankings, how they ranked previously. So, for instance, though, number 4, you see Jordan Love here. I
Okay,
know
yeah.
for a fact you can't tell me who Jordan Love is.
You are absolutely correct. I don't know who that is.
But you see an NA behind here,
Yeah.
right?
So was
For the
that
last
his
3 years.
was last year his first year?
So that was his first year as a starter. So he sat behind Aaron Rodgers for several years before
Mhm.
actually getting the starting gig in Green Bay. So NA is going to denote seasons that the players did not play, or um, like in Jordan Love's case, it's going to be start, because we're going to see some in a couple others where certain people ranked really high in the previous seasons. They were really low, and that was just because they didn't really make waves until last year. Um, so this was just my way to let everybody know. Either these guys were rookies last year, or this was the first time they're getting starts, or whatever the case may be. Um, so I mean, there's a lot here. What do you think?
I'm surprised Patrick Mahomes is number 8 from last year. That is
So
surprising.
I was too. I was too. But then look where he was last year. Like, I mean, last year as in the year before that, right?
2022. Yeah, yeah, he was
Yeah.
number 1 2022. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is surprising that in
Yeah.
2023 he went all the way down to 8. Wow.
But you know why he went all the way down to 8? He had no receivers except for Travis Kelsey. But Travis Kelsey isn't a wide receiver. So that was a big part of it, is he had no wide receiver support at all.
Mm.
Um, and that played a big part, as it will with like all quarterbacks. You can be a really good quarterback, but if you don't have healthy wide receivers or good wide receivers, it'll just it'll kind of hurt. your fantasy value and everything, because quarterbacks are going to make their money off of passing yards, and if your receivers are dropping balls all the time, well, you're not really going to get a whole lot of passing yards.
Yeah.
Um,
So, how many of these players? So I see you've got what looks like 15 quarterbacks plus a few extras. I'm guessing those are what? What are those extra ones? 16,
so these
17,
extra ones,
23.
these are gonna be guys that were either injured, or these are like your franchise quarterback dudes.
Okay.
Um, that would normally be, I guess, in my opinion, they would normally be in your top 15,
Okay.
right? Um, and same, and for the most part, I stuck with top 15. In certain other positions, I went, smaller. Wide receivers, though, are definitely going to be, um, a lot more, just because there's a lot more kind of that you have on your team. Um, so, I mean, just diving into it, Josh Allen,
Hmm.
number one. Okay, you can
Okay.
look at the last 4 years, and he's either been first or second, right? So if you're brand new to this and everything, like, you can't really go wrong with Patrick Mahomes. And there's a couple other quarterbacks that's like you're really not going to go wrong with, like, regardless of who you take. But if you want to purely look at like statistical placement, Josh Allen is your number one dude, right? Um, Dak Prescott, he jumped all the way up to two. You see last year, and when I say last year, I'm gonna refer to the 2022 season, um, because 2023 was the most recent season. I know we're gearing up for 2024, um, but the 2022 season, he was 18th. 21, he was 7th. So you can kind of see he bounces back and forth.
Hmm.
2020, I think he like broke his ankle really bad, and that's why he ended up at 33.
Oh, dang.
Um, yeah, so there's different things that play into that. Um, Jalen Hurts is another quarterback that is definitely a really solid option. Mostly because the amount of like goal line uh rushing touchdowns that he ends up getting. But he plays for the Philadelphia Eagles, and I know you haven't been paying attention to football, you're just diving in and everything, but you might start hearing things like tush push getting thrown around and everything watching football, and that's where it originated from, was Philadelphia and Jalen Hurts, just quarterback sneaking over the goal line and having a couple people line up behind him, and they just help push him across the goal line and everything. Um, and
Hmm.
it's been a topic of debate, I tell you what, in the NFL circles. Um, so I won't try to spend too much time on all these. Jordan Love, for me, was a big surprise, just because it was his first year starting for the Green Bay Packers, and that's a really young team with like no true number one wide receivers. They had Aaron Jones at running back last year, and then also like AJ Dillon, so it's almost like a running back by committee. Um, and they didn't start the year off well. So they came on strong late in the season, but for him to end up fourth in points, uh, really is surprising to me, and I think that kind of helps him with um, being worthy of consideration as your QB1. So,
And it does look like
Lamar,
he was he was a real surprise because, yeah, that it is the first time he was there. He's on the
yeah,
point at least. So,
yeah, and like, so for comparison, right? CJ Stroud down here at number 11, he
hmm.
was a true rookie, right? And he
Mm.
had a really good rookie season. Like, he brought the Texans from being the second worst team in the NFL all the way up to a playoff contender. They made the playoffs, they won a playoff game, and that was just his rookie season. So, and he came in at 11. So Jordan Love at 4, like, that's even bigger of a jump. Um,
That's
And
pretty
sometimes
crazy.
these guys really aren't like separated by a whole lot of points. Like I don't have the points to put next to them and everything. But like some of these guys might only be separated by 5 points in total. So
Wow.
at the end of the day, it's just kind of getting everybody acclimated. Um, Lamar Jackson, you saw, have a uptick, but he's been pretty like middle of the pack. Um, Jared Goff has come on strong a little bit here. Baker Mayfield had a resurgence last year with Tampa Bay as a starter. Um, let's see here. Russell Wilson, man, there's anybody that's been following football will know that it's been a really weird uh, deal with Russell Wilson. He came here to Denver for a couple of years, and it was just an absolute disaster for the Broncos. So much so that they were willing to just cut him outright before his new deal started. Pay him like I think they're paying him like $50 million not to play for him, and he went over to the Steelers to play for like $1 million or something. Um, to try to compete for being their starter. um, I would say Sam Howell's another one here at 14. That was kind of surprising, just because he's on the Redskins and they're a terrible team. They do have a number one wide receiver with Terry McLaurin, which I'm pretty sure he's on the wide receiver list, but I
Looks
have
like
never trusted
last
him.
year he was number 59. 2 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Dang.
Because he's been kind of like mired. Like so the 2022 season, he was a rookie. Didn't really play a whole lot, but like because the Redskins are such a bad team at the time. Oh man, I gotta correct myself. It's the Washington Commanders. I grew up knowing them as the Redskins, and
Oh, because
and now
they changed
they're the ones
their
that,
name like years ago.
yeah. Yeah, a couple of years ago, I went Washington football team for like a year while they were searching for a name, and then they settled on Commanders, and then there's a whole deal about how people feel about the name. I'm used to the Redskins, um, so just off the top of my head, that's what I went with. But no, Washington Commanders, and he actually got traded, I think, to Seattle, um, as a backup. So like, he was 14 last year. I wouldn't be looking to add him, as a starting QB this year. Um, let's see here. Really? So Baker stayed in Tampa. Russell went to uh, Pittsburgh, and I just, man, I still wouldn't trust him. I mean, he's battling for the starting job with Justin Fields. And even if he gets it, he might have a short leash and they might yank him after a couple games or something. Um, so Russell, Sam Howell, those are the two guys I wouldn't trust in my top 15 here from last year. Um, those are two guys I'd leave off my draft board altogether. Um, Derek Carr, he's over with the Saints, not bad. And then these guys down here, so Stafford, I can't remember if he got hurt or not. I think Stafford's not separated by many points um, from Derek Carr, and he's usually like a really solid quarterback. There's definitely tiers to this. So like when you're talking top 15 quarterbacks, like your
Mhm.
elite quarterbacks, you're only going to have like, I don't know, four, maybe five. Everybody's got their own opinion. Um, Obviously, like Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, those would be my elites. Prescott, I just don't trust yet. So he'd be my next tier down, but he'd like, if those three guys are gone, like I wouldn't have a problem drafting, you know, Dak Prescott as my quarterback. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Um, so Stafford's solid. Herbert's been a really good quarterback. Like his numbers in the previous years show it. He came in 9, and then 3 back in 2021, ninth in 22. Last year, he was kind of cut short. I want to say towards like the end of the year or whatever. He had a broken thumb, I want to say. Um, and like Kirk Cousins, same thing. Like this dude ended up at 23 and halfway through the season. I don't even think it was fully halfway. I think it was before mid-season. He tore his Achilles. But at the
Ooh.
time, like he was tearing it up. Statistically, if he would have played the full season, I almost guarantee you, like, not only will the Vikings have gone to the playoffs, but there's a good chance he would have been in the MVP conversation. So I know that was kind of like a fire hose and everything again, feeding you through the fire hose. What do you think about just the quarterbacks there?
So as I'm looking at it,
Mm-hmm.
obviously the first thing that comes to mind is don't pay attention to just the 2023 ranking, because sometimes um, some people were lower on the 2023 who have a history of being higher on the 2022 and 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at like Kirk Cousins, right? It sounds like
Yeah.
he could be a real sleeper hit if but also you said what he's got a history of getting injured, is that right?
No, that was
um
that was Joe Burrow right
that
behind
was Joe
below
Burrow.
him.
Okay,
Yep.
so he's one
Yep.
that's like he could be really good, but I think there's also kind of like a balance of uh probably there's like a higher than normal chance that he could get injured. um But I'm also looking at
Yeah. It.
like Josh Allen looks like a solid pick. He's been number one, number two, then number one, then number two.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't even see who was number one in 2020 on the list. Whoever that was is
So
gone.
there's certain things um to think about
Hmm.
with these. If there's no number ones, or like if there's certain like top tier guys, um like those players might not be playing anymore in the league, uh a la Tom Brady, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
that's what
I
I was
don't
thinking.
know where Brady like ended up at the end of that season. I just know that like Aaron Rodgers, right? Aaron Rodgers
Hmm.
would normally be a top quarterback. He's with the Jets now. Um,
Hmm.
he has fallen off kind of. I left him off the list completely because I mean he's kind of been on his back nine of his career. He's not as high of a quarterback fantasy wise. Still like an elite level quarterback in the NFL, but when it comes to fantasy, not not elite in the in the points rankings and everything. And then last year, I mean, the dude played 4 minutes of football and tore his Achilles. So um,
Yikes.
he's yeah, he's just off the list entirely. Um, and he doesn't really have a whole lot of weapons. We don't know like what he could be or whatever else. Because we didn't get to see him play last year. So this will be kind of interesting this year. If somebody wants to take a flyer on him, go for it. But I'm pretty sure he'll be available late enough in the draft. You could add him as a QB2 as like a backup quarterback, which isn't always a bad idea. Um, but yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The biggest thing is because these elite quarterbacks are so few in number, right? You kind of
Hmm.
have to like you gotta decide who you're gonna go with for quarterbacks, because you got 10 teams. 10 teams need number one, QB1 quarterbacks. So, um, like Joe Burrow really isn't a bad option. Like I don't know if I would. I think I would take Cousins as my number one quarterback if I needed, based on how the draft was playing out, I needed to take certain positional players, and I got to round 8, and my choices at quarterback were kind of gone, sure, I might go with Kirk Cousins then. Um, Joe Burrow is another one that, like, honestly, like, I would still take him in, you know, higher up. Everybody's got their own kind of draft strategy about where and when they want to draft a quarterback. I've seen quarterbacks get drafted number 1 overall, number 2 overall, uh, you know, and I mean, I've drafted quarterbacks myself, in the 8th round or 10th round. Uh, so everybody kind of values quarterbacks, but they're definitely like these guys definitely are going to be like the biggest force on your team. Like they're going to score the most points out of anybody on your team. So, for instance, like Josh Allen, his 2023 rank, I think he eclipsed like 400 points for the season, right? And if you go and look over at the wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb,
Mm-hmm.
I would be surprised if he went much over like 300 points. So normally these guys, I would say your top tier wide receivers might be in the really high 200s. And this is just kind of going from guesstimating, to be honest with you, because I know that some of these quarterbacks are really outrageous when you compare them to your other positions, and that's why a lot of people put such a premium on drafting a really good quarterback high, because they're going to have so much points, and that's going to be like one of your biggest driving forces on your team.
Yeah, and looking at it, I think kind of where I would want to look at it is, I mean, if I couldn't get like, I mean, Josh Allen seems just like a just a solid hit, just say like the safest bet, obviously,
Oh yeah,
because he's been number one and
absolutely.
number two for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
But if I was to look at, let's say I wasn't able to get Josh Allen, what I'm looking at here is I'm thinking either Jordan Love or CJ Stroud. Neither of those have history, and they both in their first year on these rankings, they both hit.
Mm-hmm.
Now CJ Stroud now 11, so but like they hit the top 15 list in their first year. Um, and I think CJ Stroud, like he was a rookie last in the
Yeah.
2023.
So I
So
mean, he's gonna grow.
yeah,
Like he's
exactly.
gonna get better.
I think he's gonna get better. So I feel like
Mm-hmm.
CJ Stroud, he's a bit lower, but I feel like that one might be that that could be a surprise, like go
Mm-hmm.
up to like 4 or 5 or something, or like even 3 or 2. I don't know. I don't know how high that guy could go, but um, number
Well, and
11
that's
first year, I think that's impressive.
no, I
And he's a
think it
rookie.
is
So yeah.
absolutely. Um, so like with that being said, that's kind of the thing. Like when players go from a nobody to a somebody,
Mhm.
now they start getting drafted way higher because people are like, okay, he hit it last year. He broke out last year. Now we're expecting to see the same kind of production or better. Um, and that's where mock drafts kind of help come into play. You kind of start seeing where people are drafting uh, certain players, and then when you look at like how for like example Yahoo, how they rank their players when you go into the draft and everything, you'll see where where that player ranks. So like CJ Stroud, for instance, you do a mock draft, you'll see Yahoo's uh, list, and you'll see where they rank them, and then like they give you a bunch of different information, and we'll go over this another time. But you'll see an average draft position that'll tell you what pick normally he goes. He's drafted by, and obviously you could go higher, you could go lower. Every draft, when you do a live draft, everyone's different.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, we'll kind of dive a little bit more into that, but
So
there's
tell me
definitely
about
a lot of
the
different. Yeah.
So, yeah, tell me more about the wide receivers. Let's take a
So
look
the
at those
wide
guys.
receivers is a lot more lengthy. Okay, I went
Hmm.
top 25 with 3 notable runners up,
Hmm.
or honorable mentions, I guess. So number one was a little surprising to me, CD Lamb. So he's a wide receiver for Cowboys. Now, if you start, paying attention, you'll see how, you know, quarterback and then wide receiver, possibly running back or tight end, like you'll see how certain guys kind of like start making links and everything. So like CD Lamb, number one wide receiver, Dak Prescott, quarterback for the Cowboys, number two quarterback. And CD Lamb helped with them hitting number two quarterback for sure. And then vice versa, Dak Prescott helping CD Lamb um, do that. So CD was drafted in 2020. You can kind of see he was, you know, more like a wide receiver two as far as his rankings, and then broke out basically in 2022, and then last year like really hit the gas. Um, so that was a surprising jump. Now, the biggest surprise for me is this guy at number two here, Tyreek Hill.
Okay.
The only reason he's a surprise for me is because he went from the Chiefs to the Dolphins, and as you can see, he's consistently been the number two wide receiver in points 3 out of the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And he's still a top 10 wide receiver in the 1 year that he went down to six. Um, and that was surprising for me. And it's not because he's not a good wide receiver. He's a very good wide receiver. Uh, just in my mind, I never thought he was that productive. Like, I knew that dude, like, if you drafted him, he was your number one wide receiver. Like, no questions about it, right? I just, from a points perspective at the end of the season, I didn't know that he was that dude. Like, I didn't know that he was that consistent to the point where every year you can almost count on him being, the number two wide receiver in total points for the season. Um, just because you have some up and downs and stuff, and if he's not on your team, then you don't pay attention as much. Um, but I got to give like big credits to him. Like, if you want a consistent wideout, you know, Josh Allen was your consistent quarterback. Tyreek Hill is your consistent wide receiver. um, Another one, so like Puka Nakua, number 4, and he was a rookie. That's what the NA is. So it's not that he didn't play. He was a rookie last year and came in at number 4. He set the rookie record for most yards in a single season. Um,
Wow.
he he just came in and balled out from the get go. Um, I'm not sure what to expect of him this year, to be honest, because he's kind of like a wide receiver to Cooper Cup, which we'll mention him later. But Puka Nakua, Cooper Cup, both on the Rams in LA, and their quarterback, Matthew Stafford. So start kind of making some connections there. Uh, Mike Evans was another one that was a little surprising for me. Just because you can kind of see like he's been a top 10, but then last year he dipped um, a little, and then he came all the way back up to 5. And I think that was kind of because they focused on getting him the ball a little bit more. Uh, Baker Mayfield had a really good year with the Bucks, signing on with them and everything to be their quarterback. Um, and then DJ Moore, kind of the same thing. He went from Carolina uh, to the Bears last year and really had a good connection with Justin Fields right away. and he's definitely their number one receiver as of right now. And I guess for guys that I'll kind of touch on here real quick, Keenan Allen was with the Chargers. He got traded to the Bears, so right now you're looking at DJ Moore being your wide receiver 1. Keenan Allen will probably be your wide receiver 2. I would not expect him to hit, number 8. He's also had, a decent amount of injuries, especially in 22. I think he had a bunch that kept him out. Nico Collins, though, this dude at number 9. So, like, you see, he was 88. He went to 78. So he's been in the league for 3 years, going on his 4th year now. He became super relevant. I thought he was a rookie last year. I didn't know he wasn't a rookie until I went and did these rankings. That was how irrelevant he was. But
Dang.
with him being on the Texans with CJ Stroud, like, there was instant chemistry and everything. Now, the next man on this list, Stephon Diggs, he went from Buffalo with Josh Allen to Houston this offseason with CJ Stroud. If you can't tell already, good players sometimes switch teams, and that really changes dynamics of like where some of these rankings apply and don't apply.
So
Yeah.
are those two guys still with CJ Stroud?
Yeah. So Nico Collins and Stephon
Interesting.
Diggs are with CJ Stroud now. Josh Allen doesn't really have like a true number 1 wide receiver anymore. However, last year they kind of cut Stephon Diggs out a little bit. Like obviously he was really good because I mean, look, Stephon Diggs 4, 7, 3, like those were all with Buffalo and Josh Allen. So like he was a big part of the offense, and I think last year they wanted to kind of start working him out of the offense. Just my personal opinion. Hopefully nobody comes at me for it. Devontae Adams, you can see 3-3-1. Like this dude was consistent. I'm trying to remember when he went to the Raiders because it was in the last couple of years, but he had Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. I want to say in 2020. His dive off, I attribute it. They started a rookie quarterback last year who wasn't that great. Like he wasn't a really high draft pick or anything else like that. This next year is kind of Devontae can be a number 1 wide receiver. Right now, I would say he's a wide receiver 2. And just pay attention to the Raiders training camp and who comes out at quarterback there. Jamar Chase being 13. Honestly, I thought he would have finished higher than 11th in 2022. His rookie season in 2021, he came out just fast and put up a lot of points. He's definitely like a high-end wide receiver 1. I think he took a little bit of a dip because Joe Burrow got hurt. So if you're a really good wide receiver, you're going to watch your production fall a little bit when you're not with, an elite level quarterback, like what Joe Burrow is, right? As evidenced by the Devontae Adams, who's just ranked a couple picks higher. He went from 3, saw his production dip because of the quarterback. I will say Deebo Samuel at 12, Brandon Ayuk at 14. These dudes are both on the 49ers. So for being a 1 and a 2 wide receiver, they're pretty close in rankings. Michael Pittman Jr., I honestly haven't really ever trusted him even as a wide receiver 2. He's over in Indianapolis, doesn't have a whole lot going on at quarterback. Their rookie that they drafted last year got hurt like every single game he played until they finally pulled him out after 5 games, and he was just done for the year. DK Metcalf, I've just kind of stayed away from him in Seattle. He just he hasn't really panned out much fantasy wise. Like on a week to week basis, I personally don't trust him to kind of help my team win that week, if that helps at all. Um, Calvin Ridley, he made a pretty good comeback. He didn't play in 22, and then in 21 he was at 106 because um, he got suspended for gambling, doing
Yikes.
sports betting and stuff. It's a whole big thing now. If they, I don't know how they end up finding out that these players are gambling and everything, but like you can't gamble on anything. It's not like, oh, you're a football player, you can't gamble on football. It's like you're a football player, you can't even place sports bets on like DraftKings or whatever for ping pong. You know, so
Dang.
um, yeah, it's like it's serious business. But I mean, hey, if you're gonna pay me millions of dollars a year, I got no problem not making sports bets. Like
Take it to the roulette table.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Just go to Vegas and have some fun or something, or
Yeah.
Atlantic City or something. Like um, have some fun there. Amari Cooper, since he went from the Cowboys to the Browns, I haven't trusted him much. If they kind of go on a hot streak, it might be worth as like a flex. Um, Wide receiver 2 maybe in a pinch. Um, let's see here. Devonta Smith had one good year, came right back to earth last year. One guy I do want to notate here, Jordan Addison here at 21. He came in as a rookie last year with the Vikings, and he posted, I want to say, like 900 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns, which was enough to get him the 21, ranked for fantasy points. I will say I do expect him to do even better this year, even with a healthy Justin Jefferson, because I know he got a lot of starting action and a lot more targets and everything while Justin Jefferson was injured for 7 games last year. But the Vikings want to spread the ball. Teams are going to focus on Jets, and so I mean, who else are you going to throw to? Well, Addison was a first round pick last year. He came out and he did really good at the wide receiver 2 position. This is just me speaking. And yeah, you might call me a little bit of a homer and everything, but I do kind of see it like I expect him to crack the top 15 next year. That would be my early hot take on the situation. Hopkins, he used to be good. He's an older wide receiver. He was a high, like elite number 1 wide receiver, but when you get older, you drop off a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, this was the dude to have. And so it kind of sucks if you've been playing long enough, you'll watch these players just kind of gradually decline and fade until they're out of the league or whatever. And then you get nostalgic and you look back at some of these guys and be like, man, I remember this dude. He was the best. Let's see here. So I mean, really, I mean these guys like Jaden Reed. I want to say he's on the Packers. I want to say he's on the Packers. So he was a rookie last year. I don't know if he was necessarily the number 1 wide receiver for the Packers. The problem is like that Packers team is so young that there hasn't been like a whole lot of hierarchy created, as far as like who your like elite go-to players are going to be. But he might be worth a stash, like especially for like a wide receiver too. Um, depending on where he's getting drafted, try not to overdraft him. Um, but I would expect him to make a jump from year 1 to year 2, just like I would expect Jordan Love to kind of continue on from what he did last year. And then our honorable mentions are going to be 3 guys that got injured. So Jets, like I mentioned, he missed 7 games with a hamstring injury and ended up 29th. So he played 10 games last year, still went for over 1,000 yards. I mean, this dude's elite. Like, he's my number one wide receiver, and I am absolutely biased. I have no problem admitting that at all. But he's broken. Like, his rookie season in 2020, he ranked 6th overall. At the time, he set the record for most receiving yards by a rookie for a wide receiver. He's the fastest wide receiver to hit 5,000 yards. He had the most receiving yards in the first 2 years of his career for any wide receiver. I mean, like, this dude just is racking up records every single year. And I tell you what, if you're a Vikings fan, you love seeing him hit the gritty too after a touchdown. And like just the year before, he was number 1. So he's been going up. His yards have gone up every single year from his rookie year. Just last year being injury marred. Production dipped, obviously. Jalen Waddle is another one. He'd be the wide receiver 2 behind Tyreek Hill on Miami. But the way they toss that ball around with Tua at quarterback, like, Jalen Waddle is definitely, I'll tell you that, so with the other league that I manage and everything that I've had for years, with that, we started Keeper League last year, and one of the teams actually had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and those were their 2 keepers, which to me, I feel like is a little odd that you're going to keep, like, your 2 top wide receivers are on the same team. Just to me, that's a little odd. All right, so next we have the running backs, and we're going to see here pretty quickly that the interesting with running backs is that because they're so undervalued in the league and everything, that there's not a lot of like continuity as far as like who's gonna be the top running backs. It changes like very frequently, year in and year out, and that's just because the league is transitioning to more like a pass happy league and everything. The running backs have to not only be able to run the ball but also catch the ball out of the backfield. And so there's not as many teams that are just committed to like running the ball down your throat anymore. And so like there's a lot of good running backs out there. It's really hard to determine like how each one is going to do from year to year, because things are kind of just so fluid and change. And then at the same time, running backs get hurt like quite often, and that's kind of one reason why you're seeing a lot more of a transition to like running back by committee, where a team will use more than one running back, and it helps take like the load off of your number 1, your star running back. But then at the same time, like, the number 2 running back could easily outscore the number 1 running back any given week, and so it makes it really difficult fantasy wise. So at the top you have Christian McCaffrey, number 1 in 23, number 2 in 2022. And then the previous 2 years, you'll see he was lower, and that's just because he was hurt. And he's been doing a little bit better about staying healthy. Raheem Mostert at number 2. You can see the previous years, he's pretty much irrelevant at 26, and then 153 in 21, and then 48 in 2020. he's never really been like a true number one running back. And so last year he was definitely like a massive surprise as far as that goes. Travis Etienne, uh, number three, finally had a really good season. In 22, he was coming back from a knee injury, and that's why he was at 191 in 2021 because his rookie year he really tore up his knee. Um, Brees Hall, same thing. Rookie year in 22, tore his ACL, but he was doing really good up until that point. And then Joe Mixon, he's usually been pretty good, but you can kind of see um, some lower rankings, and some of that's going to be attributed to injuries. Kyron Williams kind of came out of nowhere, um, and it's just that's kind of how it's been in LA with the Rams. Is they almost have like a new number one running back every year or every other year. They just kind of been cycling through them. Derrick Henry would be the first like true bell cow running back. Um, and last year his production kind of dipped, but so did the Titans' offense. And this year will be very interesting because now he's with Baltimore, and Baltimore was the number one rushing team last year. However, they didn't have any like true number one running back to have on your fantasy team, as far as like your lead fantasy running back. So it'll be really interesting to see how he does over there, but I think he can do really good. Uh, Rashad White in Tampa Bay, just after his rookie season, made a bigger impact last year. Bijan Robinson and Jameer Gibbs at 9 and 10, both rookies, first round draft picks, and well, Jameer Gibbs might have been a second rounder, but both of them came out, did a really good job for their teams in Atlanta and Detroit, respectively. Um, James Cook over in Buffalo at 11. He skyrocketed up because Buffalo decided they were actually going to start trying to run the football. And then Saquon Barkley, he's been a big name, but you can kind of see he's like all over the place, and that's because he's injured. And I mean, last year he was even injured and missed a few games, and so it's kind of hard to trust him because of the injury thing. Um, David Montgomery, he had one good year back in 2020. Um, hasn't been like super solid since. Alvin Kamara, he's kind of seen his production down, uh, go on like go on the downslope after Sean Payton left. Tony Pollard had his breakout year in 2022 in Dallas, and then you saw him slip when he was forced to be the number one running back in Dallas because they let Ezekiel Elliott go. Um, and that's like a really good example because we'll go down to the honorable mentions here, and you'll see I have Ezekiel Elliott. So, like Tony Pollard was number 7 in 2022, and Zeke was 20th, right? But Zeke was the number one running back for the Cowboys. So because everybody's attention was on Zeke, Tony Pollard, who is a little bit more of like catch out of the backfield, um, you know, quicker kind of guy and everything. Um, he ended up being the higher back, like in regards to points and stuff by the end of the season. Josh Jacobs has been up and down. He's over in Green Bay now. Last year he was injured, and that's what really hurt him. But you can see the year before he was number 3. Austin Eckler had 2 really good seasons, you can see, and then their book ended by, really close to being 30th. I stayed away from him last year. I don't remember if he got injured. I know the Chargers defense, or not defense, but offense struggled some, especially once Herbert went down. Zeke, once again, he's on here, but he was like the number 2 running back. He was buried in New England. He didn't really do a whole lot, but just because he was relevant and now he's back with the Cowboys to be their number 1 running back again, I had to put him down because you have to consider him. Jonathan Taylor had 2 really good years, and then injuries the last couple years. Aaron Jones was injured last year, but the previous years he was pretty solid as running back. And then Nick Chubb also really solid as running back. But last year he ended up messing up his knee during the middle of the season. Otherwise, I think Chubb would have definitely probably been like top 4 running back, I think. But you can see previous years, like you have people that bounce, like they come in from nowhere and then they go right back to irrelevance too. And a lot of times it's because of injuries. So it makes it just that much harder to kind of lock down your running backs. So I mean that's for running backs. Tight ends, this will go a little bit quicker because there's so few tight ends you can actually trust that, to be honest with you, like the majority of people are going to be kind of left out in the cold when it comes to having a solid scoring tight end in fantasy for you. And then it's really just trying to hit the waiver wire, see who's hot, possibly even streaming guys. It really depends. But your big ones, Sam Laporta came out of Detroit last year, had a monster year. Evan Ingram was a really big surprise for me with the Jaguars because he's never really been trustworthy. I was really surprised to see he ranked 6th in 2022, but you can kind of see like 2021 rank at 23, 2020 rank at 16. Like those numbers aren't really going to get you as like a starting tight end spot on somebody's fantasy roster. And so to kind of see that he did have an uptick the last 2 years and finished as high as 2nd was like a huge surprise. And for me, kind of like puts him on my radar for like, oh yeah, I'd be okay with drafting this guy, right? And taking him if some of these other guys are off the board. Travis Kelce, like the most consistent dude out of the bunch. You go from 2020 to 2023, it's 1, 2, 1, 3. I mean, it's hard to kind of get more consistent than that. So, he would be like one of your studs that goes off. He goes off really early, sometimes first round. Hawkinson in Minnesota, he didn't do so well in 2021, but after he was traded to the Vikings in 2022, he was the number 2 tight end, and then last year he was number 4. I think he could have been higher had he not torn his ACL late in the season. But, when healthy, especially in Minnesota's offense, he's going to be a stud. George Kittle, another guy. I don't remember what happened in 2020 to have him be ranked so low, but you can see like 4, 3, 5 from 21 through 23. Really solid. David Njoku, I feel like kind of had a big year last year because Joe Flacco came in to quarterback the Browns, and they were kind of doing a quarterback carousel with guys getting injured and everything previously. So I don't know if I trust him again this year. Cole Kmet in Chicago, I think he's going to be kind of like an up-and-coming tight end. We'll see how he does, though, with Caleb Williams coming in Chicago, because I think Williams is going to be a bust. Ferguson really hit the ground running last year. I want to say Dalton Schultz was the number 1 tight end in Dallas, and that's why Ferguson was 47 and 22. Trey McBride, man, I want to say he's in Washington, and he's not a guy that I would necessarily think of to have. Taysom Hill, same thing. Um, he can be useful. I guess I don't really count on him. It'd be for me like if that's who's available and that's the best out there, then sure. Um, the two honorable mentions here, Mark Andrews. You can see the previous 3 years. He's an absolute stud. He placed 13th last year. That's because he was out with a bunch of injuries. Normally, he's the safety blanket for Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. So I would put him right up in the top 5 as far as top 5 tight ends for fantasy. And Kyle Pitts has a lot of talent. The issue is in Atlanta, they didn't have a quarterback. A lot of issues with who was playing quarterback and everything there. With Kirk Cousins coming in, if he's starting right away, he being Kirk Cousins, if Cousins is starting right away, I think Pitts will easily jump up into, I mean, you might say like a top 6, top 7, because it's going to start getting really crowded as far as your top tight ends go. And then we'll just kind of move on. Kickers, there's not a whole lot to kind of throw in here. I just put them in because it's kind of interesting to see the parity that you get from year to year. Justin Tucker at number 5 is normally considered one of the best kickers in the NFL over in Baltimore. He ended up being 5th ranked for points last year after being 1st in 22, 3rd in 21, and 8th in 2020. But like a surprise guy, Cairo Santos, I believe he was over in Miami, ranked number 2 after being 27th and 20 the previous 2 years. So, to give you him in order, Brandon Aubrey in Dallas, rookie year, he was number 1, Cairo Santos, 2, Jason Myers, 3, Matt Gay, 4, Justin Tucker, 5, Harrison Butker, 6, Jake Elliott, 7, Dustin Hopkins, 8, Cameron Dicker, 9, Blake Group, 10. And I guarantee you, if I put a slot in for 2024, if we came back to it at the end of the season, I guarantee you'd have some names from last year, but like the most would probably be new. It's what I would say. So a lot of times you kind of just stream these guys. You try to get a good kicker, but if you have to, it's not a big deal to kind of drop a guy 1 week and go pick up somebody else to play because they have a favorable matchup. With that being said, Adam, can you tell me who Harrison Butker is?
No.
That's your kicker over there in Kansas City.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So another Kansas City guy on the list. And then last, defenses. So defenses. The kind of surprising thing for me is I did not think Dallas was the number 1 fantasy scoring defense. And you can see that they've been pretty consistent the last 3 years after being 21st back in 2020. I think it'll be interesting to see what they do this year because the defensive coordinator in Dallas went over and took a head coaching job in Washington with the Commanders. And, but I want to say the majority, if not all the pieces of the Dallas defense are still kind of in place. And then Dallas went out and hired Mike Zimmer, who is a very, very well respected and well known defensive minded guy. He was the head coach of the Vikings for a good bit there. Was able to get the Vikings the number 1 defense and took them to the NFC Championship where they so infamously choked against the Philadelphia Eagles. Baltimore, number 2, they've usually had a solid defense. You see in 21, they ranked 26. Cleveland was a massive surprise for me at 3. You see, they haven't cracked the top 15, 16 of the league in the previous 3 years. And so that's a massive jump from 21st ranked and 2022 to 3rd is a huge jump. Buffalo, a little bit more consistent, top 10 defense every single year. Miami had a really weird year in 2022, but other than that, it's been a top 5 defense. The Jets was also a little bit surprising, considering how bad the team is. They have a bunch of good defensive players. Unfortunately, it doesn't always equate to having a good fantasy defense. Vegas, after ranking right at the bottom of the league for 3 years, the Raiders managed to jump up to 7, which is very interesting. Pittsburgh, usually known for their defense, had 2 off years where they ranked in the bottom half of the league in 21 and 22 after ranking 2nd in 2020. Came back to be 8. San Francisco, also known for having a really good defense, at 9. And then Indianapolis ranked 10th last year. And I guess to me that was kind of surprising in a way, but then at the same time not, because Indianapolis keeps themselves like in the conversation every year for the playoffs, especially the last couple of years at least. And that's usually in part thanks to their defense. So as you can see, there's very few defenses that actually are pretty consistent as far as, you know, you can almost like guarantee that they're going to perform for you every single year. As you can see, like really there's more parity with defenses and the scoring every year than there are consistencies. So that's another one that some people will hold on to and just have like hold one defense and everything all year. And that's another reason why sometimes I'll just choose to stream defenses based on their matchups and, what team's playing who based on what defenses are available.
And so I guess bunch of different stuff. It's hard to really know what to think about it all, but
I know it's just like feeding you right through that fire hose, a lot to take in and everything, but for you and everybody else that is out there that's listening, watching, trying to learn a little bit more about fantasy football and everything, hopefully it just helps you and everybody else out as like a reference point or something, something you can kind of refer back to. Maybe it helps you in the draft.
Yeah. And there's definitely several different strategies you can go into with some of the different ones. I think one of the categories, the rookies seem to be a better option. Some of them it's like, hey, the consistent ones you really want to be paying attention to, and some of them it's just like it's a coin flip,
Right.
So at this point it's like, okay, now that I've got at least some idea of what's going on, who some of these people are, I feel like actually doing an actual like a what,
like a mock draft,
fake draft, mock draft, yeah.
Fake draft, a faux draft. Yeah, we call them mock drafts.
Mock drafts.
Yeah.
It definitely would be interesting doing a mock draft and kind of seeing how all of this information now plays into that. So
yeah, absolutely.
So
that's something we'll end up going into. We'll probably dive into that and go through one of those and just kind of see, uh, what we go through and pick, and possibly even use our little cheat sheet.
yeah, definitely have to use that for references for when I'm actually doing a real draft.
Yeah.
So that'll do it for us today. If you guys want to see more videos like this, we are, at least until the fantasy season actually starts, we're going to continue doing a lot of the setup stuff and whatnot. He's teaching me all about it, and I think we will end up doing a mock draft eventually. I'm not sure when we'll do that, but yeah, so if you guys want to see any more of these videos, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and like if you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
And don't forget to comment if you want to see anything specific at all as well.
Very true.
All right.